98% of PGA Tour players name Bushnell their preferred rangefinder. That number is real. It's also the reason a $500 unit feels worth it, and it was never a claim about accuracy. Aim a $100 rangefinder at the same flag, and it reads the same number. The extra $400 buys something the box never mentions. I spent years selling this equipment: retail counters, fitting bays, the back rooms where the reps come through with next year's models and this year's margins. I watched golfers hand over $400 extra for a distance number they could have had for 90. Here is the part I want you to sit with before we go any further. 2 golfers, 1 flag, 1 reading. A tester ran a $90 go against a Bushnell Tour 5 for 45 days across 18 full rounds. Inside 200 yards, the numbers matched to within a single yard every time. That is not a lucky sample, that is the whole category behaving the way physics forces it to. So if the number is identical, the question stops being which rangefinder is accurate. The question becomes what you are actually handing over $400 for. I know the answer because for years I was the one collecting it at the register. It is not printed on the box, and it has nothing to do with the flag you're aiming at. Here is how the thing in your hand actually works, because the moment you understand it, the price tags start to look strange. Every golf rangefinder does one job. It fires an invisible pulse of infrared light at 905 nanometers. The flag bounces it back, and a timer inside measures how long the round trip took. Light travels about a foot every nanosecond. To land inside a yard, that timer has to resolve roughly 6 billionths of a second. That is the entire trick. A laser diode to send the pulse, a sensor called an avalanche photodiode to catch the faint return, and a timing circuit to do the math. The beam spreads about 1.5 feet for every 1,000 feet it travels, which is why every rangefinder, cheap or expensive, wants a steady hand at long range. There is no premium physics. Nobody is hiding a better laser behind a higher price. And that raises the question the box never answers. If the engine is the same in all of them, where does that engine come from? Not from the brand on the front. It comes from a small supply chain that sells the same measuring part to almost every name on the shelf, cheap ones and expensive ones alike. How that part gets from a factory you have never heard of into a $500 box is the piece the marketing's built to keep you from asking. Start with the 2 ends of the shelf. The Bushnell Pro X3 sells for $499. The Revisory on Amazon drops as low as $35 and $65 on an ordinary day. More than 9,000 of those Revisory units sold in a single month, which made it the #1 selling rangefinder on the entire site, sitting on over 1,400 5-star reviews. It is tournament legal, it measures out to 1,000 yards, and it vibrates when it catches the pin. One buyer carried his $35 Revisory alongside a friend's Bushnell across all 18 holes, and said the cheap one was just as accurate and locked onto the pin faster. And the testing outlets admit the part the marketing works hard to bury. My Golf Spy, one of the most used equipment testing sites in golf, put it in writing that almost every rangefinder performs about the same hitting a stationary target. Read that sentence twice. A flag is a stationary target. That is the entire job of the device, so the $460 gap between those 2 units is not buying you a more accurate number. It cannot. The number is physics, and physics does not sell a deluxe tier. What the gap does buy is real, and I'm going to show you exactly where it hides, because this is the point where almost every budget versus premium video on the internet gets it flat wrong. So here is where the cheap ones genuinely give something up, because I'm not going to insult you by pretending a $35 unit is the same physical object as a $500 one. It's not. The Bushnell has better glass, so it picks a flag out of a cluttered background a beat faster at 200 yards. It has a metal shell where the cheap one has plastic. It has a magnet strong enough to hold on a cart rail over a rough path and tighter sealing against rain. That is what the $400 actually buys: glass, a magnet, a housing, and a warranty. Now be honest with yourself about your own golf. You're aiming at a pin under 150 yards, standing still in daylight. For that shot, a half-second slower lock and a weaker magnet change nothing about the number you play. The expensive unit is a better built tool. It is not a more accurate one. If you're a weekend golfer, you are paying $400 for a magnet. If you play competitive events in bad light at long range, pay for the glass and never think about it again. But look at what is missing from that list. None of it is accuracy, because accuracy was never the thing you were short on. Which leaves the real question. The case and the glass explain the build. They do not explain why the one part that actually finds your number, the part doing the whole job, costs the brand almost nothing to drop in the box. That is where this stops being about golf and starts being about a supply chain. Let me answer the objection I can hear you forming, because I heard it at the counter 1,000 times. The cheap one will break and then you will have paid twice. Sometimes, yes, the plastic housing and the weaker seal mean a budget unit dropped on a cart path or left out in a downpour is more likely to die young. That is a real difference, and I am not going to wave it away. But run the actual math on it. You can buy a $90 Go-Go, drop it in a lake, buy a second one, drop that one too and buy a third, and you have still spent $270 against a $500 Bushnell. The budget unit does not have to last as long, it just has to cost so little that lasting long stops being the point. So the durability gap is real, and it still does not rescue the price, which brings us back to that measuring part and the factory it actually comes from. So here is where it comes from. There is a company in Shenzhen called Milesy. You will never see it on a tour bag. It sells its own golf rangefinders under its own name, sitting on more than 270 patents and over 10 million users worldwide. That is not the interesting part. Milesy is also a factory. It runs a full OEM and ODM operation, which in plain English means it builds finished rangefinders that ship inside other companies' boxes, with other companies' logos printed on the front. The brand that competes with you on the shelf, and the factory that quietly built the unit sitting next to it, can be the exact same building. Once you know that, the shelf never looks the same again. 20 logos, a small handful of factories. Go scroll the rangefinder listings on Amazon some evening and you will start to see it yourself. The same body shape, the same button layout, the same little slope switch on the side, wearing 4 different brand names at 4 different prices. People notice. They leave reviews saying this looks exactly like the one my buddy has under another name. They are not imagining it, they are looking at the same unit with a different sticker. The chassis was designed once, in one building, and licensed out to whoever wanted to put a name on the front. The logo changes at the print stage. The rangefinder does not change at all. Before we get to the part inside every one of them, there is one feature the premium tier charges you the most to feel good about, and the rulebook forces it onto the cheapest unit too. Slope. It is the feature the premium tier sells the hardest. The real plays-like distance once it accounts for the hill in front of you. It matters enough that a golfer was publicly accused of cheating over it in front of more than 20 million people at the Internet Invitational, after a competitor accused him of leaving the slope switched on during play. And here is what nobody in that pile-on mentioned. The $90 Red Tiger has slope. The $35 Revasri has slope. Every one of them has it, and everyone has a switch to shut it off, because under the rules of golf, Rule 4.3, slope has to be disabled in competition. So every maker, from Bushnell down to the cheapest unit on Amazon, builds in the same off switch. The premium brands then sell that switch back to you as a tournament feature. It is a rulebook requirement, not an upgrade. The slope is the same, the switch is the same, the number is the same, which leaves only the part that does the measuring and where that part actually comes from. So, where that part comes from? The answer is less of a conspiracy than the price makes you expect, and more damning. The thing that measures your yardage is a finished module sold off the shelf by a handful of optics suppliers most golfers have never heard of. One of them describes fitting its own golf module in the plainest terms. You connect 2 power wires and 3 communication wires, and it starts working. That is the whole integration. The same class of module comes out of the same small pool of factories that also build hunting rangefinders and the distance sensors inside surveying gear and drones. The measuring was solved years ago and sold by the crate to anyone with a logo and a housing. Golf is just the category where that finished part gets the fanciest box, because a golfer is a comfortable buyer who has spent a lifetime being taught that a higher price means a better tool. A brand buys the module, wraps it in a case, tunes the software and prints a name on the front. You are not buying a rangefinder. You are buying a logo bolted onto a commodity part. The same measuring core in a $35 body and a $500 one is a 14 times markup, and almost none of it is the electronics. The most expensive component in the box was always the name. And here is who sets that price now. Bushnell has been around since 1948, and for most of that time it was a maker of optics. Today it is something else. In the last 2 years it was bundled into a group called Revelist and sold to a private equity firm, Strategic Value Partners, for just over $1 billion in a deal that closed at the start of 2025. So the brand behind 98% of tour bags is now a line item in an investment fund, run to produce a return. A fund does not pay $1 billion for a brand and then leave its price alone. It pays for the name and the tour presence and decades of trust, then leans on all of it to hold a premium. The hardware stopped earning years ago, and you are the one who pays that premium at the counter. The Pro X3 is a genuinely good tool, but the $400 gap over a unit that reads the same number is not an accident of engineering. It is a return on someone's investment, and the someone is not you. Now go back to the number I opened with. 98% of tour players prefer Bushnell. It is true, and it means far less than you have been led to believe. Tour players do not walk into a shop and pay $500. They are handed the units for free, supported by a branded truck at every event, with the name already stitched onto the hat. A caddy who has used the same unit for a decade, resupplied for free at every stop, is going to prefer that unit. That is human, and it has nothing to do with your bag. Preference on tour measures familiarity and sponsorship reach. It does not measure whether the device reads a truer yardage than a $90 one, because on a stationary flag, it simply does not. The statistic is real. The conclusion the marketing wants you to pull from it is the con. Best players in the world, best rangefinder, therefore you should pay top dollar. What that number honestly tells you is which company has the deepest tour presence and the biggest marketing budget. You have been reading a marketing budget as if it were a spec sheet. Spend enough years watching brands buy their way onto tour bags and the 98% stops sounding like proof and starts sounding like a receipt. It tells you who paid to be there. It tells you nothing about the number on the screen. So here is what to actually do before you spend the money. Ask 3 questions. First, will you use this in daylight, aiming at a pin inside 200 yards? If yes, the same number off a $90 unit is the same number off a $500 one, full stop. Second, do you play competitive rounds in flat light at long distance, where a faster lock genuinely matters? If yes, and only then, the premium glass earns its keep. Third, are you paying for the device or for the name stamped on it? Those 3 answers tell you whether to spend at all. Here is which of the honest 4 fits which golfer. If you just want a rangefinder that works and costs next to nothing, the Revasri is the cheapest one that genuinely does the job and the one to keep as a backup or hand to someone just starting out. If you want slope and a solid magnet for the least money, the Red Tiger gives you both for around $90. If you would rather put your money into the hardware instead of the badge, the Milesy comes straight from the factory that builds units for other names, so nothing on the price is paying for a logo. And if you want the one most golfers should actually buy, it is the Go Sport V Pro. It held its number against a Bushnell over 18 rounds, it charges over USB, and it does the 2 things that matter without asking you to think about it. For the weekend golfer aiming at a daylight pin, that is the whole decision. Buy the Go and put the $400 you saved into green fees. Next time you're in the shop holding the $500 box, remember what is actually inside it. The same measuring part the $90 one uses, and a name they need you to pay $400 to hold. Put it down and go play.